Good evening, everyone, and welcome to our virtual book launch event, Tour de Force, the musical journey of the Caribbean, an evening of music and conversation with the authors, Dr. Christine Gangelhoff and Kathleen LeGrand, and special guests, Justilien, Peter Ashbourne, and Garrett McQueen. I'm Douglas Barkey, and I have the privilege of being the Dean of the Liberal and Fine Arts at the University of the Bahamas. And our guests are joining us from various places around the globe. And while that is very convenient, I know for myself, I'd rather be with all of you somewhere in Nassau in person, enjoying this warm evening. We're holding this event to honor Dr. Gangelhoff and Ms. LeGrand's achievement with the publication of this book, and to also provide a glimpse, sort of an inside glimpse at our program at the University of the Bahamas, since our guests also include a faculty member of the program. For those of you that don't know, we offer a Bachelor of Arts in Music, where students acquire an understanding of music from various analytical, historical, and cultural perspectives, and learn about the culture, traditions, arts, and literature of the Bahamas, the Caribbean, and the wider world. Students integrate musical knowledge and skills, develop performance skills on a principal instrument. We are very happy to have all of you with us tonight, and so let me tell you a little bit about the evening's activities. After Dr. Gangelhoff tells a little more about the book and how it came to be, I will learn about Tour de Force, the musical journey of the Caribbean, by experiencing some of its content, both live and through recorded means with our special guests. We've got plenty of room at the end of the program for you to ask questions, so please have some ready to go. For the moment, just sit back and enjoy the presentation. Now, let me introduce one of our co-authors. Dr. Christine Gangelhoff is one of our outstanding and award-winning faculty and a multidimensional practitioner of music. She is an experienced performer, an enthusiastic teacher and mentor, an advocate for arts and cultural institutions, and a dedicated scholar. She is currently an associate professor of music and has held positions at the faculties of Memorial University of Newfoundland and St. Thomas Universities in St. Paul, Minnesota. She has performed as a soloist and with chamber ensembles and orchestras in the United States, Canada, the Caribbean, and Europe. Dr. Gangelhoff is currently the artistic director of the Nassau Music Society, a nonprofit organization that presents world-class concerts, offers free master classes by visiting artists, and provides scholarships to Bahamian students. She holds degrees from Yale University and the University of Minnesota. Dr. Gangelhoff is a founding member of the chamber ensemble Seaforce, and since its formation in 2008, the group has been featured in concert in the Bahamas, Trinidad and Tobago, Dominican Republic, Jamaica, Cuba, the U.S. Virgin Islands, the United States, and Canada. In addition to performing and teaching, Dr. Gangelhoff has done extensive research on art music from the Caribbean region and organized multiple conferences on this topic. She's also a Powell performing artist. Dr. Gangelhoff, please tell us more about your book and how it all came together.
Thank you, Dean Barkey, for the intro. And thanks so much to all our guests. It's so great to see so many friendly and familiar faces. So I'm going to share my screen. Okay, so since Kathy LeGrand, the book's co-author, will present more details about the book, I'd like to put it in a broader context. My goal is to show how artistic and creative research and practice can develop communities of creativity, collaboration, and support. The book is a result of over a decade of research and relationship building with many collaborations, performances, recording events, and opportunities for mentorship along the way. Even though my background is in classical music, I've always been actively involved in many styles of music and have always sought out local traditions wherever I've lived. My entire musical career, I have fought to put all styles of music on a level playing field and to not position so-called classical music, a term I co-opted from Garrett McQueen, thank you, Garrett, as the standard by which to measure quality and worthiness of music. There we go. So it was natural for me to dive into Junkanoo and Reikenscape when I moved to the Bahamas. I'm still involved in these and other local traditions, but the thought of classical or concert music from the region had never occurred to me until I was teaching a world music course, and I needed an example of music from a Haitian Vodun ceremony. When I did a search on the internet, I came upon this piece, Voodoo Jazz Sonata. I became so fascinated with this work, and it became one of my favorite pieces for flute. The composer, Julia Racine, became a mentor and friend, and years later composed a sonata for me. I'd like to play an excerpt from the third movement of the Voodoo Jazz Sonata. This version is performed by Christy Lee on piano and myself on flute. You can hear in one of the interviews with the composer, he talked about how the piano was 90% percussion in this piece. So you can really hear the rhythmic aspect of the piano in this. So at the same time, I had also learned of a handful of Bahamian composers, and I sort of started to connect the dots. So some of those connected dots became articles and bibliographies, which you'll hear more on later. Others led to recordings. So these are the CD covers of recordings that included works from the same ongoing research. So we have the 3 C4 CDs. So Chaka Music was our first CD. Deep Blue is our second, and that's a CD of all Bahamian composers. And our third CD, Tour de Force, which later became the soundtrack for the Tour de Force book. I also wanted to share Melodic Conch Salad, which was a very special project for me. So it was a UB student ensemble, MUIN 242, a group that grew out of the MUIN 255 course that I taught. The 5 students in the course arranged music for their own ensemble, choosing from a repertoire of Bahamian traditional, folk, and religious songs. Here's their rendition of Blind Blake's O Carolee.
Come and play down by the sea. Oh, my darling, call the thee. The moon is right for you and me. So come and play down by the sea. You know that I love you. I know that you love me too. Let's play in harmony together by the sea. The world is ours to share. There's music in the air. Our love will always rise when morning stars are bright.
So that was Elvin Hanna on vocals, and he's now a very successful music educator in the US. Through this research, I have finally felt comfortable with so-called classical music. I see how it can be relevant, inclusive, and accessible. Not all scholars agree with my stance, and I have been accused of taking a colonial approach on this scholarship, focusing on the European traditions instead of the African-influenced styles. On a very superficial level, I can understand this sentiment, but I also think it really oversimplifies a very complex situation. Should I ignore this body of work because it is European in nature? Should Caribbean musicians be limited to participate only in genres that are considered traditional or indigenous? So many Black musicians in the US and Europe, and likely elsewhere, tell stories of being discouraged from becoming classical musicians, and instead encouraged to pursue other styles such as jazz or popular music. How is this situation any different? I would love to hear thoughts from our presenters and audience members. One of my favorite aspects of this research is the ongoing collaboration and sense of community. In 2013, I worked with the Nassau Music Society to organize the Festival of Afro-Caribbean Composers. At the same time, I worked with conductor Marlon Daniel to put on the International Symposium of Composers of African and Afro-Caribbean Descent, which was the beginning of the formation of a vibrant community of musicians and scholars that would be a major component of the Tour de Force book and much more. The second symposium, the International Symposium on Concert Music from the Caribbean, was held at the University of Trinidad and Tobago and organized by composer Adam Walters. The third symposium, organized by Jaime Bofill, Carlos Carrillo, Adam Walters, and myself, was held at the Puerto Rico Conservatory in San Juan. It was truly a magical experience, really reinforcing the sense of community, collaboration, and support. The last example demonstrates how we are extending the reach to younger audiences. This is a collaboration with the Nassau Music Society, a concert series and educational infocitals for Bahamian school children. This is an arrangement of a Haitian merengue, adapted for melody, instrument, and piano by Julio Racine, and rearranged by C-Force for our instrumentation. I thought it would be nice to start and end my presentation with the music of the composer who was such an influence on my research and creative practice. Sadly, he recently passed away in October 2020. So he's been somebody that I've been really promoting the music of lately. So I hope you enjoy. This is Volonté. Thank you very much. And now I'm going to turn it back over to Dean Barkey.
Everyone, and welcome to those who have just entered the room as Dr. Gangelhoff was speaking. I want to mention to you that we've muted the mics and so on, and we're putting a question and answer period at the end of the session today. So write down your questions. We're looking forward to answer them at the end. We're really honored to have with us tonight Peter Ashbourne. Peter Ashbourne is one of Jamaica's most versatile musical figures. He's an experienced composer, arranger, performer, and band leader. He taught in the jazz department of the Jamaica School of Music from 1976 to 1979 and was appointed to the position of Senior Music Fellow by the University of the West Indies Mona campus in 2013. Peter has composed widely for theater and dance and in the genres of classical instrumental and choral music. He has completed many commissions for orchestra, choir, symphonic and wind ensemble, and chamber orchestra. Peter has also been one of Jamaica's most prolific and award-winning composer-arrangers of commercial music. As for popular music, Ashbourne has composed, arranged, and produced many notable songs and albums. He has a Bachelor of Music degree in composition from the Berklee College of Music in Boston. And Peter, we're all looking forward to hearing from you, and the mic is all yours.
Thanks for that introduction, Dean Barkley. Making me a little nervous. Anyway, greetings all, good evening. Thanks to Christine and Kathleen for inviting me to this event, and congratulations also on the publishing of this important work. This, Caribbean composers have often been underappreciated, and today's event suggests that hopefully this situation is starting to change. All right, on to my stuff. The Elena variations were written in 1985 for recorder player Rosina Christina Moda. Soon after meeting Rosina, who incidentally is now my wife, I was intrigued to hear her playing on recorder some Van Eyck variations. I was hugely impressed by her proficiency, and this led me to the idea of writing a similar set of variations for her on a Jamaican folk theme. This opened a novel compositional opportunity for me. While I explored the characteristics of the recorder, I also tried some 20th century composition techniques in this piece. Here now are two short readings of Elena and her variations for soprano recorder solo. The first by Rosina Moda on soprano recorder, followed by Christine Gangelhoff on transverse flute. Okay, one of the main reasons for my survival as a professional musician in a small island state has been my versatility. My main source of income for about 30 years was music for advertising. And although that business was a hectic, deadline-driven activity, it brought in regular money and was not boring. So here's an example. This is a 30-second jingle that actually uses the melody of a Jamaican work song called Emmanuel Road.
Come down now, juicy. Anytime that you feel hungry. Juicy time. Breakfast or lunchtime. Juicy time. Come down at dinner time. Juicy time. Any time of day is juicy time when you feel hungry. Juicy time. Breakfast, lunch, or dinner time. Juicy time.
Okay. Having an income gave me a little opportunity to explore and exercise other more artistic and aesthetic ends when time permitted. Jazz groups and practice bands, musical theater productions, classical music ensembles, music for dance, radio and TV productions, pop music performances and productions all became part of my professional career. If nothing else, it made for an exciting and varied musical life. My co-composition, Halfway Tree, from the album Blind Man Swimming, is an example of integrating several musical techniques into a finished product. Here's an excerpt. Okay. Here's a few more examples of my compositional output. Ring Games and Jubilee, once again, based on folk themes, was written for string orchestra. And let's hear a bit of it. And The Winds of Hope was commissioned for the Jamaican Olympic team in 1992.
step, we're moving on. We open up our arms and face the future. Now the way ahead seems oh so clear. This is the time. Now is the test. This is the place for the best of the very best. Yes, this is the road. This is the road. Now we're just a step today. We're striving for gold. This is the time. This is the time. Now is the time. This is the place for the best of the very best. This is the road.
Okay, and as we float off into the sunset, wish you a good evening. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter. That really was a wonderful presentation. You are so versatile, and also appreciate the realistic view from the music, for the world of music and working both commercial and really creatively in the arts. Let me introduce our co-author, Cathleen LeGrand. She writes, edits, and conducts research in several diverse subject areas. Art music of the Caribbean has been a major research focus since she was introduced to the topic in 2008. Kathy has worked as a librarian for over 20 years at many institutions, including here at the University of the Bahamas, at Royal Thimphu College in Bhutan, and at Lyford Key International School in New Providence. She's a two-time winner of UB's Stanley Wilson Award and for excellence in research, and she has degrees from New York University and Emporia State University, and is currently a doctoral candidate at the University of Leeds. Kathy?
Thank you, Dean Barkey, and thank you everyone for being here. It's very kind, and especially thank you to our special guests, Chris, Peter, and Garrett, who've joined us on the program. Let me share my screen. This is the refrain of our times, right? Hi, everybody. So, as Christine pointed out, it all started with one person and with one name, and we knew there was more. And so the first thing you ask is, how do you find stuff when you don't know what you're looking for? And what I will say is, I'm a librarian and we're good at that. So we just started looking everywhere, right? So we excavated books and journal articles and the liner notes for CDs and started extracting every single thing we could find. And we kept finding more names and more titles of works. And the first thing we realized is, okay, we have to compile all this information so that nobody else has to do this work. And we need to put all this information someplace. The second thing we realized was that this stuff is really pretty unknown, and it's information people don't have. It's music people haven't heard or played. So this work is really worth doing. So fast forward like a dozen years, what are the outcomes of all of this work that we've done? So as Christine said, there have been 3 albums that her trio has recorded based on music we've sort of encountered during this research, 3 academic symposia bringing together a scholarly community around this information. And Christine's relationship with Racine inspired him to compose a flute sonata for her. But I'm here to talk about the text-based outcomes. So we have composed 2 volumes of bibliographies. So for each Caribbean island, we compiled all of the information, the names of composers and titles of compositions and the works that have been recorded and scores that have been published, all into like one written record that sort of shows a cultural richness that they weren't aware of before. So for instance, Christine took those bibliographies to Havana and she showed them to the people at the Casa de las Americas, and they also had not heard of most of this stuff. They didn't know these works or these composers. So they invited us to write an article for their journal, Bulletin Musica, describing what we had found. So we wrote the article and they had it translated into Spanish, which made us very happy. So now the information's out there in 2 different languages. And we were also invited to contribute to 2 international encyclopedias, either biographical information on the composers or information about the music. And, you know, Christine and I work with students all day, and we really wanted something for the students that we knew. And we realized we had enough content for a textbook, and that's where this particular project comes in. So the textbook breaks the Caribbean region down into 3 linguistic regions, which based on like historical legacies. So we have a chapter on English speaking, a chapter on French speaking, and a chapter on Dutch speaking. Now, I realized that I did not say Spanish speaking Caribbean, and that is not an oversight. It is a consequence of how the textbook emerged from the bibliographies, and we have not done Spanish speaking Caribbean yet. And we considered waiting, but given that we have to look everywhere and extract piece by piece, it's very painstaking, time-consuming work to do the bibliographies. So we decided to go ahead and do the book and then circle back around to Spanish-speaking Caribbean. So we will get there. It is not intentional. We will get there. So the book itself, one of the things I wanted the book to do, because I'm the non-musician here, was to answer the question I kept asking, which is, why does this music here sound like it sounds and that music sounds like it sounds? So we offer some geopolitical history that explains some of the influences on the music's evolution in a specific location, and that describes the musical soundscapes from which each composer emerged. We also introduce you to composers, so their life and their works. This is the entry for Racine. In the dozen years that we've been doing this, we have talked to lots of people, composers, their descendants, musicians, students, and we have lots of original interview material. And what we really liked was and those are people who don't normally appear in these accounts, people you don't often hear from. And we really wanted to introduce them to the book. So we wanted to have a conversation, bring them into the conversation. So throughout the book, there are these blue boxes where you can hear their voice sharing their insights and their perspectives on their own music. It is a multimedia production. So it was designed around a soundtrack, the 2 CD set. So every track on the CD appears in the book, and we talk about the work. We might talk a little about the specific performance of that work on the track. We offer a little musical analysis of each track. We pose discussion questions, and the questions aren't just about music. One of the things that is so interesting about this to us is that the music is kind of a lens that you can use to look at issues that have a lot of contemporary resonance, like migration, commercialism, identity, diversity. So we pose a lot of questions and ask students to think both broadly and deeply about society and culture. We offer, for people who want to learn more, all the good students can do more reading and they can do more listening. We also have a supplemental YouTube channel. All of the suggested listening appears on our YouTube channel, Cariclassical. So you can find all the reading there. And also, in addition to having collected a lot of interviews, we've just collected a lot of musical performances that we've shot over the years. So that is also on the YouTube channel. So you'll never know what you'll find there. It is worth looking. I do want to point out that the book is being used now as a text. Christine designed an original online course, Survey of Caribbean Music, around the book. This is the 3rd semester she's offered it. The course gets good response, and so does the book, like I always ask. And students think it's easy to use and understand. It's like, well, that was one of our goals, so I'm glad to hear that. We wrote it so that people like me, who are not musicians, could understand the concepts. And I also just wanted to share that this book is not the end. This is kind of a never-ending, lifelong project. So a few more things in the pipeline in this area is we do want to come around to the Spanish-speaking Caribbean. So we want to do the 3rd volume of the bibliography. We want to do a chapter on the Spanish-speaking Caribbean for the book. We also want to go back to the completed bibliographies and update them because it's time. And we would also like to maybe somehow realize our initial vision for that project, which was some sort of interactive multimedia platform for them instead of just a text. Maybe we can get there. And another thing we've always really wanted to do is a recording of Racine's flute works, especially the Sonata à Christine. We'd love to record that. And we have a lot of original interview material with him too. So we'd love to have an accompanying monograph. So that's all. Actually, I'm out of time. So thank you very much. And I'm going to turn it back to Dean Barkey.
Thank you, Kathy. I appreciate that. I'm looking forward to the Spanish-speaking version, by the way. So please work on that for a couple of years down the road. Let's meet another one of our special guests, also part of our faculty at the University of The Bahamas. Christian, or Chris Justilien, is no stranger to the music scene. His musical journey began at his father's church in Pinders Point, Grand Bahama, where he played the organ as a child. He was an avid musician all through high school, and this may explain why Chris has been actively involved in his community, developing projects geared towards the advancement of young people and the preservation of the Bahamian culture through music. Among his accomplishments, Chris received a Bachelor of Arts degree in Professional Music Studies from the Berklee College of Music in Boston, Massachusetts, where he was the founding director of the Berklee Caribbean Ensemble, with noted jazz trombonist Phil Wilson as facilitator, and a master's in education from the Vander Cook College of Music in Chicago, Illinois. Chris is the leader of the Colors Entertainment and Junkanoo organization, which has made appearances in Hollywood, New York, Puerto Rico, Jamaica, Trinidad and Tobago, Italy, and regularly performs at the Harbor Fest in Norfolk, Virginia, just to name a few places. Now let's hear from Chris as he shares some of his performances.
Hello, hello. It's a pleasure being here among old and new friends. This project has really been such a wonderful journey. I remember when we first started C-Force, given the opportunity to write in a different genre, because I was doing a lot of arrangement for local bands here, a lot of work with a lot of the popular artists like the Ronnie Butlers, some of the Bahamian, playing with in the studio with them and doing just a lot of local tunes. Having the opportunity to now write some classical and chamber music was a welcomed opportunity. I'd like to just share a couple of clips with you with some of the work we did with C-Force, and I think a greater part of the joy in working on this project was traveling throughout the Caribbean and other places and meeting other musicians and really experiencing all the things that we have in common. You know, here in the Bahamas, we're kind of isolated in a way from the rest of the Caribbean. But when you get in, you hear the rhythms and you see the musicianship and you hear the different types of harmonies that we're sharing. It's really a wonderful thing. This first clip I'm going to share with you is a clip from a Grupo Cariclassical when we were in the Dominican Republic, and we were looking for some percussionists to play along with C-Force while we were there, and they gladly joined in with some bongos and a weird sounding homemade instrument, which had some drums and some shakers and all kinds of stuff on it. But I'm gonna just play a brief clip of it and hope you enjoy it. Here we go. I'm gonna share the screen with you. And I hope you can see it. I'm gonna press play and yes. So that's a short clip of Pinders Point, one of the tunes that that I wrote as part of the chamber piece for C-Force. This is the first of suite, the first suite that I've written. It comes in 5 movements, and Pinders Point really speaks about where I grew up as a child. And you can hear the carefree nature of the piece. And these guys really did a good job in representing what the feel of the piece was all about. Okay. Let me go to another piece here. This one is a bit different. Along with the music, Marion Bethel, a Bahamian poet, wrote a piece for a poem for each of the movements. There are 5 movements in the piece in the compilation, And this is from one of them. It's called Bimini Blue Marlin. And this is really the finale of the suite. And she did a wonderful poem, and I'd just like to share that with you. It's just a minute long. And just take a listen. The music is of Bimini's playing in the background, and she's doing her thing on the music.
In between the silences of the game of fish.
Let me try it. Sorry.
Bimini, Blue Marlin. So, so, so sweet, this sweet. For all times past, the season, in between the silences of the game of fishing, blue marlin simply swim in the open sea, far from land. They spear a school of sardines and other prey. They swim their being in the whole notes of the sea. And so the new anthems of Guanahani, written in the sugarcane fingers of a young boy and blown into the lungs of a silver euphonium, harmonize a classical suite out of the silence of eternity. This suite, so, so sweet.
Yeah, that is, that was done so effortlessly on the part of Marian Bethel. I think she really made the music come alive with her interpretation. Along with having the opportunity to compose for C-Force, it was a pleasure just rearranging a lot of the old Bahamian music that existed in the past. We've done stuff by Clement Bethel, we've done stuff by various composers from other islands, including composers from Jamaica, Trinidad, Puerto Rico. This one is a special one it's called Bahamian, and it was done by one of our very own Franz Hepburn. There was a poem that was written by another playwright in the Bahamas, and he took that poem and he put some music to it. And I have the honor of performing the euphonium on this. This one's called Bahamian, and I'll just play just a little bit of this work for you on the euphonium. Yes. And I hope that you enjoyed that little bit of music. But what I'd like to say is that I'm glad that we're finally, paying a little bit of attention to the talent and the composers in the region. I often say, if we had to look at the talent, the raw talent that is in places like Cuba, I've had many opportunities to visit there, in Jamaica and Trinidad and all over the place, in Haiti, Dominican Republic. Rhythmically, we have a very rich culture. And I'm glad that we're starting to document these things so that the young people, the next generation, could learn that the value of this music is equal to that of any region, anywhere in the world. And I'm happy that Christine and Kathy is taking the time to shed a little light on the composers from the region, and I'm happy to be part of this movement. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Chris. And you certainly are right. It's so important to pass this information on and this styles and so on. So it's really good to hear your perspective. Well, let me introduce our third and final special guest of the evening. We're really happy to have with us Garrett McQueen. Garrett is a proud native of Memphis, Tennessee. He's performed as a bassoonist in venues across the U.S. And Garrett enjoys giving solo recitals, performing chamber music, presenting master classes, and teaching at the high school and college level. His passion for the art form and his advocacy for classical music are fueled by his motivation to give voice and offer space to music by Black and contemporary composers. Garrett regularly performs over the airwaves and on the digital stage with content featured on the Public Radio Exchange and local public radio stations across the U.S. He offers music and racial equity presentations at prominent festivals and conferences and at countless schools, colleges, and universities. In addition to working as the executive producer and co-host of the Trilloquy podcast and owner of Trilloquy LLC, Garrett works as an equity consultant, guest speaker, curator, and presenter at the intersection of race and classical music. A fun fact, Garrett served as guest instructor for the Bahamas Music Conservatory. Garrett, we're really looking forward to hearing from you.
Thank you so much, and thank you for that introduction. It's really an honor and a pleasure for me to be with you here today. I'm going to share my screen with you. And not that screen, but the next. Here we are. All right, so I'm so glad that the word journey has been used in this presentation and to title this presentation. You know, whether it's a piece of music or an entire career, music is a journey. And as we all traverse our own journeys, we learn things and meet people that give more depth to not only our own stories, our own journeys, but to the journeys of everyone around us. So I thought I would spend my time with you today showing a bit of my journey, how Christine and Kathy's work on Tour de Force has played an integral role in it, and how it's all impacted my own work of celebrating not only Afro-American music, but the music of the entire African diaspora. So most people here in the States anyway, consider the beginning of their formal musical journeys as something that started in music school, something that started with the focus on the study of Western European music, so-called classical music. But when I talk about my own journey, I have to honor what came before me. In the middle photo on your screen there is a photo of my family as far back as we're able to trace. They were actually pictured there on the plantation from which they were liberated. The little girl in the photo, her name was Pearl. She's my great grandmother. I actually had the honor of knowing her and living with her. She passed away when I was about 6 years old, but it's through the traditions that they codified, specifically the Negro spiritual and other Black music, that I consider my own foundation of my own musical journey. To the right of my screen, you see a photo of a man named Henry Thacker Burleigh, or Harry Thacker Burleigh. He famously took what so many of us learned from our own families, those folk traditions of the Negro spiritual and so on, and really brought them into a space in which the masses, many more Black folks and folks of all hues and cultures, could really see the importance of that Black music and how it's foundational to what we call American classical music. And then to the left of your screen is the family of a Bohemian composer, a composer from what's now known as the Czech Republic, named Antonín Dvořák. When he came to the United States in the late 19th century, in the 1890s, he affirmed those very spirituals, as he said, Negro melodies, as being foundational to any American school of music. So my entrance into the field of so-called classical music would not have happened without these and other affirmations of the Afro-American experience and our contributions to the global diaspora of music. Again, as I affirm the journey and the importance of the journey, I always make sure that I affirm those who came before me and really help me understand the importance of understanding the relationship between race and what we call classical music. So with that very strong foundation and that very pro-Black perspective, I started playing the bassoon at age 12, and I quickly fell in love. I went through middle school and high school, and after playing the bassoon and after earning a bachelor's of music in bassoon in my hometown of Memphis, I moved to Los Angeles, where I earned a master's in music from the University of Southern California. While I was in California, I had the pleasure of spreading my love and joy of so-called classical music and the Black folks who have contributed to it in many different fields. In California, I had the pleasure of playing in movies and television shows. The image you see there, I think I was actually tracking something for a television show. And I also had the great opportunity to play with a number of orchestras out in Southern California. One of the musicians that I met along the way is a woman who's pictured in the middle of your screen. Her name is Krista Waddlet. She's actually from Canada, a bassoonist and a drummer, who introduced me to the idea of teaching outside of the United States. She had a family member who knew someone who knew the woman pictured to the right of your screen, Stephanie Clear, a woman that I'm sure many of you know. At this point of this sort of connecting the dot sort of introduction, I was playing with the Detroit Symphony Orchestra, and Stephanie asked me to attend a summer camp down in the Bahamas, down in Nassau, to help teach bassoon, to help teach oboe. So I agreed to come down to the Bahamas to see what I could offer to that summer program. I came to Nassau prepared to teach and to enlighten everyone about my perspective on Black music, playing the bassoon, the oboe, and other things. But what I got in return was much greater than what I could have ever offered anyone. When I had the pleasure of visiting the Bahamas, it was during the 40th independence. As you can see some of the photos there, I really got a firsthand look at things that I had never been exposed to before, a Black culture that was really different, completely different from mine. This thing called junk canoe, I had never heard of that. And learning about it just really opened my eyes to, again, what the diaspora of music means. And of course, all of the incredible food and drink of the Bahamas is a part of the journey that I will never forget and continues to impact the work that I do. So when I returned home, I knew that I had an even bigger job to do in my work and in my activism. The way I viewed Black music, so-called classical music and otherwise, was incomplete. There were Black stories and Black perspectives and Black music that I was not aware of. Understanding that there was so much more to the diaspora, I vowed to make my voice even bigger as a musician and as an activist and advocate, to become an even greater advocate for composers of color, Black composers on a global scale. After about 7 more years working as a full-time bassoonist, a full-time orchestral musician, I transitioned onto the digital stage and started working in broadcast media, where I continued to fight for that broader view of so-called classical music. My focus on programming music that spoke to the Black experience earned me an interesting nod across many media outlets, including a newspaper, as you can see there. Here in Minnesota, I was named a classical agitator in big, bold words. And through that sort of press is actually how I met Christine. Our conversations and our collaborations have been one of the most affirming legs of my journey, and her work is lighting a path for so many of us. Christine and Kathy's work affirms my career as a content creator, as an interviewer, and as an activist, and as a pro-Black activist. And I have to also note that Christine exposing me to Christian Justilien's music is something that I will never forget. You all have heard excerpts from his suite, Pender's Point, and I believe Blue Marlin, but the opening movement of that suite, San Salvador, the New World, has quickly become weekly listening for me. So I'm especially honored to be here to share a space with Mr. Christian Justilien. Thanks to Christine Gangelhoff putting me on to C-Force in this music. So as I continue on my personal and professional journey, I can only hope to learn and to experience even more of the musical diaspora of Black music. There's so many things that we have yet to discover about each other, especially those of us here in the United States. And the work of Christine and Kathy is an integral part of that fight and that road toward the complete decolonization and liberation of so-called classical music and its institutions. My goal is to make sure that that phrase encompasses so much more. Classical music is not only what comes from Western Europe, it's everything, especially Black folks around the world who have contributed to that tradition. My focus and goal as a musician, as a media personality, and as a human being is the celebration and liberation of all Black people, especially Black musicians. And that means Black people everywhere. Tour de Force is a part of that journey for me. I hope it's a part of the journey for you. And I honor Christine and Kathy's work toward that musical liberation. So once again, thank you so much for inviting me and having me here. It's my honor to share my experiences. I hope to make it down to the Bahamas again soon to meet more of you in person and to engage with this music in person. I'll turn it back over. Thank you so much. It's an honor to be here.
Thank you, Garrett. It's an honor for us, and we certainly look forward to having you visit us. That would be fantastic. Thank you very much to all our guest performers and to our audience for giving us your time and attention this evening. And now it's your turn to participate. In order to ask questions, we'll unmute your microphone if you raise your virtual hand. Now you'll notice at the bottom of your Zoom window, a reactions icon. It might be under the More menu also. If you click there, you can select the raise your hand option, and we'll be able to see your hand and unmute you. Once you've asked your question, you can then lower your hand and we'll mute you again. I see that Krishan, I'm going to go ahead and unmute you. And go ahead and let me see. Yeah, go ahead, Krishan.
I would just like to congratulate both Dr. Gangelhoff and it's more of a comment. I would like to congratulate both Dr. Gangelhoff and Kathy LeGrand on their book because it has truly added to the limited amount of history on Caribbean composers and Black composers, because I could recall the history course years ago at the College of the Bahamas, now UBN. I was researching on a composer, a Caribbean composer, and there was no information in the history book on this composer. And so I'm really happy that they have added to the history for Caribbean composers for future students in college who would like to do projects or research on composers that are not in average history books. So I'd just like to thank them for that. And it was an awesome session.
Thank you, Krishan. And I should mention too, comments are certainly welcome as well as questions. Claude, I have you up next, and you should be unmuted.
Hello to everyone. I do not have a question. I just want to congratulate Christine, Kathleen, Christian, but especially Christine and Kathleen for work for the work at this book, and it's a great thing you are doing. I had the chance to meet you in many times, and particularly at the meeting in. Please help me, Christine.
Yes, that was
in Puerto Rico.
Yes.
So I know the work you are doing, how great it is, and I wish a good continuation to you. You know, I am following your conference from Montreal, Canada, and we are working in the same direction. And so I am very sensitive to the work you are doing, and I want to congratulate you. It was a pleasure to meet other people also, as Garrett. I didn't know your work, and I want to have the book as soon as possible to be in contact with all of you. So good luck in your work. Once again, I apologize for my English not so good because, you know, I'm living in a French environment. So thank you very much and good luck to everyone in your very nice and fascinating work.
Thank you. Thank you much for your comments, and certainly you're very understandable. So thank you very much for your comments. Mackinson has requested to make a comment. So Mackinson, you should be able to unmute now.
All right. First, I want to commend Ms. G and Ms. LeGrand for such a great book. But I just wanted to ask, like, I'm sure there were days where you kind of felt like discouraged or wanted to give up. How did you handle those days when you felt like overwhelmed with so much work?
Thanks, Mackinson. So that's a great question. And basically, because I collaborate so much, I feel like one of the things that really motivates me is to not let people down and to really just keep working through, even though I may be exhausted or discouraged by something. By working with other people, it really kind of energizes me and keeps me going. So that's one of the key things in all of the research work I do. It always involves some level of collaboration. So that's kind of my go-to solution. So thanks for the great question.
Can I also take that one?
Yes.
I just wanted to say that several people said to me, how did you write a book? And I said, I kind of had to cut a lot of things out of my life. So one of the ways you get this done, even when you're discouraged, is you just put your head down and you do it. You just got to do the work. So there's no magic trick to it. But collaborating also really helps. Like when we were down, we would talk to each other. So
lastly, I just wanted to know, where can I get a copy of the book?
Actually, I just pasted into the chat. If you look, there's a link to Amazon.com, and you can go right there and have a copy, order a copy. So it's available. We have Jean Joseph next. And Jean, you should be able to unmute now.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Just want to say congratulations and a job well done to Dr. Gangelhoff and Ms. LeGrand. I just wanted to know, during the course of the research for the book, were there any relationships that were found between some of the older Caribbean composers and maybe some of the other more prominent names that we might have known from history? Were there any influences where maybe a Caribbean composer had an influence on them?
That's a great question. I don't know if Garrett wants to talk about Chevalier de Saint-Georges. That's the first one that comes to mind for me. He was a composer born in Guadeloupe. Garrett, do you want to say anything about him? I don't want to put you on the spot.
Oh, no. Oh, please. No, please continue.
Oh, well, so he was a composer born in Guadeloupe and was the son of an enslaved woman and a plantation owner, and was moved to Paris at a very young age and had an upbringing of composition. He was a violinist, a fencer. He was just a kind of incredible all-around superstar. And he has been called the Black Mozart, which is quite erroneous, as he was born before Mozart and actually influenced Mozart. So there's documentation about his influence on Mozart's work. So that's kind of the biggest one that I would say is in response to your questions. There's many cases of others. There's legacies of families in Curacao and Haiti where there are composers that influenced future generations. So for example, Julio Racine that I talked about, he has influenced a younger generation of composers. But as far as composers that you would have heard about in your textbooks, except for my textbook, you wouldn't have heard of many of these composers. So I don't know if anyone else wants to add anything to that.
All right. Don't see any hands up at the moment. So I do have one question myself, just for both of you. The book, as you've talked so much about in detail, represents multiple international interdisciplinary collaborations that you were somehow able to pull off. What do you think was the key to managing all those relationships?
Okay, yeah, I can talk on that a bit. So a couple things. There are, in the Caribbean, it's really essential to be kind of on the ground talking to people. So I made the most headway in this research by actually traveling to places and meeting with people and interviewing people and establishing relationships. And that's something I keep emphasizing through this work is building relationships. And a lot of people who are present here are people that I've interviewed and that have just become friends and kind of part of this community. And so I think sometimes people make the mistake when they're conducting research of seeing people as informants and getting the information and then it's kind of being done with them. And to me, it's kind of an ongoing relationship, and I'll follow up with people. And even though I'm not interviewing them anymore, I'll let them know on the progress of the research and any upcoming things that they may be featured in, or their relatives may be featured in. So I continue the relationship. So to me, that's a really important thing. And it's very rewarding too, because I feel so honored to be a part of this community and the incredible musicians that I've met throughout. So that's something that really, to me, is of great value.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. We do have a few more questions that come in. Roger, you can go ahead and unmute yourself and share your question.
Thank you. And thank you, Kathy and Christine. Looking forward to reading the work. We don't document much of what we do in the Caribbean, and it's great that you've chosen to do this. And we have a text, we have a work that highlights what it is that we do here. One question, are you still getting opposition in terms of persons saying that classical music is not Caribbean music? Oh,
yes.
Sorry.
Sorry, Roger, I accidentally muted you. I was trying to myself. Yes, that's an interesting question. I'm glad that you brought it up because I did insert that into my presentation. And I would love to hear some feedback on that. And for the most part, no, people are always, so excited by this, and it's unfamiliar work and people see the quality of it. However, I have had conversations with other university professors and reactions to this book and other research. And these are instances when they clearly have not read the book and they're not familiar with the research, and they say, what is this person doing focusing on classical music in the Caribbean when there's all of these, rich traditional styles? And the thing is, they don't know me because, as I said, I've always put everything on a level playing field. And of course, I cherish Junkanoo and Rake and Scrape like the next, and I'm not, by focusing on classical music, I'm not elevating that above anything else. And I love what Garrett said in his presentation, how he's totally flipping the concept of classical or so-called classical music and how using that to decolonize. And I totally love that concept because it's really perceived as a colonial music. And I know Dominique Lejeune has talked about this a lot too, and how, well, why would people in the Caribbean be limited to these styles? And Garrett's talk about decolonizing Black culture and the African diaspora embracing this music. This is music for everybody. And so for the most part, I would say it's embraced, but there are still surprisingly people that have that view. But as I said, I felt an oversimplification, and they're not really looking into what we're doing.
Mm-hmm. And if I can add to that, I think the pushback we have to really understand that it's not only by word of mouth or by what people think. It's really embedded into our institutions. So here, you know, in the States, if I go hear an orchestra play, it's very unlikely that they'll be playing music that comes from anywhere other than Western Europe. So when we talk about pushback on one level, there isn't a lot there, but you know, the way I see my journey and my work is really helping the institutions understand what they're upholding and helping them understand that there is so much more music out there. You know, some of the names of the Black composers that we say are William Grant Still, Florence Price, Nathaniel Dett. You know, those are some of the big names when it comes to Afro-American music. We have a long way here in the States to get our institutions to recognize those people, much less the Black music that comes from beyond our borders. So once again, I think it's so important that Christine and Kathy have done this work, because in different parts of this industry, there is lots and lots and lots of pushback. Working in broadcast media specifically, folks just expect to turn on the radio, the classical radio, and hear something by Mozart and not necessarily something by Christian Justilien. That's what we're trying to change. And I think that's what Christine and Kathy are really setting in motion by writing this book. The pushback may not be visible, but it is very institutional. It's very systemic. And this project is helping us demolish that.
Great, thank you. That great question. David Vivo Wilson, I've got your hand up, but I've got Christian also who would like to put a word in. So Christian, please go ahead, and we'll go to David next.
Well, just listening to that question just now, it really has me boiling right now. It has me boiling. We have one classical radio station in Nassau right now, one classical radio station, and from the very first album that we did, which is it was more classical than all of the others, really. We did some classical music from some of the, Eastern European classical composers. And I approached them to play C-Force music over and over again. And they said they had to turn it over for approval from their head office in Canada somewhere. And they would not play C-Force music. And this is classical music. I mean, there's nothing more classical that's being recorded in the Bahamas and what C-Force has done for the past 3 albums. So I'm just tempted to ask everyone in here to call that radio station. I think it's 92.5. Call them and ask them, can they play some C-Force classical music? In the Bahamas, we can't get our music played. The same thing that Mr. McQueen is saying just now, getting people to understand that there's more out there than just the same, what I'll call it. I'll call it chicken and fries for lack of a better term. Okay, the same chicken and fries all the time. Every time you go to order, hey, all we got is chicken and fries. Let's stop it. We have to change the diet, and what it's doing also is prohibiting the young possible composers, persons who are studying music and they want to do other things, to get involved.
Thank you, Chris. Mr. Wilson, go ahead. You can unmute yourself. I'm not sure, he put his hand down. I'll wait for coming in. Justin, go ahead and ask your question.
Good evening. My question is for Dr. Gangelhoff. I want to know what really inspired you to start playing the flute and embracing your talents.
Oh, thanks, Justin. Well, that goes back many years, and I started playing flute in junior high, and it was something, I was sort of obsessed with music from a young age. I was actually obsessed with recorder in 4th grade, and then I just continued, and it just evolved, and it was something that sort of, I felt like I didn't have a choice. It was just something that I had to do, and it has taken me in so many directions, and so I'm grateful that I stuck with it, because it's really taken me in so many different directions. And as you can see today, all these incredible musicians I've encountered along the way, it's been an amazing journey.
Thank you for your question, Justin. Do we have any more? We are at 7:11, so we've gone over a little bit, but those were excellent questions. I'm so happy to have them. Davido, oh, go ahead. Glad that you were able to raise your hand again. And then we'll go to Leslie Smith after that.
Okay,
Go
good
ahead.
afternoon, good evening to you all. Firstly, I would like to congratulate Dr. Gangelhoff and Miss LeGrand on the book. I will be looking forward to reading it because now I have some more information, some more source for my study, which would be in the future on Caribbean music. And my question is, after this recording, after this meeting, will I be able to access the recording? I'd like to go back through it and look at the slide presentations on all the music and information being presented.
We do have a recording, and I think we can make it available to everyone who attended. We'll send out a link to it. It'll be available, in the cloud, the Zoom cloud. So I think you'll be able to review it. Yes.
Okay, thank you very much. And lost track of the second question. I apologize.
Just come on again if you think of it. We'll go to Leslie Smith next, and then Caleb after that. So go ahead, Leslie.
Good night, everybody. I would just like to congratulate Miss LeGrand and Miss Gangelhoff. And this question is for you, Mr. J. You being a euphonium player, the euphonium is a very demanding instrument, and it's also a very particular instrument. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe that a lot of composers in the early days didn't really know how to insert the euphonium into their music. And that, I think that's one of the reasons why why a lot of solos were written for it. You being a euphonium player, who would you say, if any, were some of your influences, like fellow euphonium players around the world, coming up and growing up in your younger years, or even now?
Well, ironically, I listen to a lot of trombone players because they were more readily available than euphonium players. One trombone player that had a significant effect on me was a guy two actually. There's a guy by the name of Bill Watrous. He had such a beautiful sound and such a singing quality about his tone. Just go on YouTube and check him out. And I think one of my former teachers, Phil Wilson, who taught at the Berklee College of Music, he had a profound effect on me with both playing and composing. He was the one who really pushed me to go into composition and really treating my instrument like the human voice. I think those two would have had the greatest impact on the way I play and my attitude and my approach towards playing the euphonium. But I must say that Dr. Gangelhoff also had a great effect on me as well. She may not know that, but I'll tell you how. Playing euphonium, that's such a big brassy instrument, along with a flute, is crazy. It's absolutely crazy. To have to support and play harmony, and to have a good presence and a nice tone that support a gentle instrument like the flute, it really puts a lot of pressure. Yeah, Dr. G, you put me under a lot of pressure. You got to ease up.
Sorry about that. Unintentional.
It's been fun though, because it's taught me how to listen to the other voice even more. Right? Yes. And to be a supporting staff. You don't have to be in character all the time. Sometimes you have to be behind the scenes. So it helps you to be a little more sensitive to what's going on around you, especially in soft passages when she's playing something beautiful. And here I come with this big elephant in the room, and I have to dance. It's not easy, but I enjoy doing it, and she's made me a better supporting euphonium player. So I'm not looking at myself as more of a soloist, but more of a supporting cast in the ensemble.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Leslie, for your question. Caleb, you can go ahead and unmute and ask your question, please, or comment.
Okay, good night. Well, firstly, I wanted to say congratulations, and I really enjoyed the presentations tonight. My question of the night is, why is classical music so underrated in the Bahamas? Like, why do you think this is the case?
I'd like to probably just make a brief comment on that. If you're being fed a steady diet of one thing and none of the other thing, you know, how are you going to learn to appreciate it?
Well, that's true.
You know, this is the problem we have. If we just get fed the same thing over and over, and we kind of underrate what our young people would really appreciate, and we deprive them of the opportunity from tasting that. And music, to me, I always tell my students, is like food. It's exactly like food. I went to a restaurant here one time and I asked the waitress, it was an Italian restaurant. And I said, well, I want to order something. I don't know anything about this menu. Can you tell me about it? She said, I don't eat that. You know, what's that all about? If you don't eat it, you have to taste it to be able to sell it to me. Yeah, if the radio stations are not tasting it and selling it to me as a listening audience, how do you expect me to like it? And that is the problem that we face, not just in the Bahamas, but all over the Caribbean. You know, we get stuck into one kind of groove, one kind of music. We're eating the same thing all the time. We're tasting the same thing all the time. That's my...
Thank you, Caleb, for your question.
I'll just very quickly add that, you know, in that question, what, you know, an appreciation for classical music. In the time that I spent in the Bahamas, I experienced lots of classical music and the appreciation of it. Maybe many people would not categorize Junkanoo or Rekenschrape as classical music, but I certainly would. So I think there's certainly, from my perspective, there is an appreciation for so-called, again, classical music in the Bahamas and across the Caribbean. I think a lot of our work, again, and the work that Christine and Kathy have done is about deconstructing that phrase and making sure that we're referring to more rather than, you know, only the traditions of Western Europe.
Well, thank you, Garrett. And thank you, everyone, for attending this evening. I think it's time to wrap up. We're almost at 7:20, so excellent questions. It's so good to have all those questions. Thank you, Dr. Gangelhoff and Ms. LeGrand, for sharing your book and your talent with us. And thank you to Christian Justilien and Peter Ashbourne and Garrett McQueen for your wonderful performances and presentations. And a special thanks to the Office of Advancement for all their support behind the scenes, especially Ms. Tennille Roll for all the work she did in organizing our presentation. Now, if you're interested in getting a copy of the book, I did paste that link right into the chat. You can also go to Amazon, just search for Tour de Force, A Musical Journey. It'll come right up to the top also, if you lose the link. And then if you're interested in supporting one of our music students at UB, we also have a scholarship fund, and I've included links, depending on where you're located. You can go ahead and just donate right off a debit card or credit card. And then finally, if you are interested in becoming one of our students, contact Dr. Paul Jones. I've put his email in there, and he can explain to you and talk about our Bachelor in Arts and Music that you can work on. Good evening, everyone. Good night, and enjoy the rest of your evening. Thank you for all your support.